She said, "Go find someone else." Until she found him. My quiet, legal, and devastating revenge that took back my marriage, my dignity, and every last lie she built with her side piece. She told me sex wasn't her thing until it was with our friend. He became her exception, and I became the roommate who paid the bills and smiled on command. When I finally asked how to win her back, she said, "It's just different with him." So I made it different for me too. I planned a revenge you can't undo with tears or make up promises, because you can't beg your way out of a signed document and a packed moving truck. If you've ever been told to be understanding while your needs are ignored, this story is your oxygen mask. Hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you've ever felt invisible in your own relationship. Your voice matters here, and so does your dignity. I used to tell myself that love meant adjusting your appetite to fit the kitchen you have. If we didn't have sex often, I would swallow the ache and call it maturity. I'm 38, she's 36, and for years my wife framed our marriage like a minimalist apartment. Clean lines, no clutter, and please don't ask where the warmth went. "I don't need it the way you do," she'd say, her tone neutral as a waiting room. "But I love you. Isn't that enough?" At first, it was. I believed her. We were compatible in 100 other ways. She liked to plan. I liked to execute. She loved small rituals, slow Saturday breakfasts, curling up with the same blanket on the couch, the crossword folded into careful quadrants. I loved being useful to her, the way she'd exhale and lean her weight into me after a long day like I was a doorframe she could trust. Then COVID happened. The house got smaller. The quiet got louder. Touch changed from something we wanted to something we negotiated around. Safety, consent, fear. But even after the worst passed, the drought stayed. I kept telling myself patience was love. My body kept asking questions that my mouth felt guilty saying out loud. One night, when I reached for her, she stiffened, then turned to face the wall. "Breath in, breath out. I can't be the person who solves this for you," she said. "Maybe you could. See other people? I'd be okay with it." I stared at the dark curve of her shoulder. That was the first time the word poly showed up in our marriage like a guest who did not knock. It wasn't foreign to us. We had friends in open relationships, people with ruled charts and impeccable calendars. But I never imagined it for us, because we already felt like a project I didn't want to outsource. Still, I tried. I went on dates. I put on a smile that felt borrowed, laughed at jokes, and watched eyes dart to my wedding ring as if it were a museum label. "Do not touch." The women were kind. Some were honest enough to say my sadness felt heavy. I came home from each date feeling like I'd cheated on my grief with my loneliness. After a few attempts, I stopped. We found a tentative rhythm again. Less sex than I wanted, more companionship than she feared losing. We survived on the small things, her palm on my back when she passed me in the kitchen, the way she'd text, "Get home safe," when I worked late. The ritual of tea with honey at 10 p.m. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. A year and a half ago. Perfection did not walk through the door, but something with easier edges did. We were cleaning up after dinner with our friends, a couple of poly folks, a couple monogamous, and one friend, Dean, who landed everywhere like a cat. Always sure he belonged. Dean was easy. 32, broad smile, a laugh that turned heads at restaurants. He had a way of looking at people like they were the only ones in the room, and a way of leaving a room like it owed him nothing. I liked him. Everyone did. Later that night, she dried the last glass and said, too casually, "I think I want to sleep with Dean." The glass slipped in my hands and clinked the counter. She didn't flinch that I tried to decode the sentence. Not, "I'm attracted to him." Not, "I'm curious." "I think I want to sleep with Dean." A wish wrapped in a decision. My heartbeat moved into my throat. All the gentle, rational scripts I had stored for a conversation like this spilled across the floor. I wanted to ask, why him? Why now? Why when we're finally okay? But I also knew I'd told her I could be okay with her seeing other people if that ever felt true for her. I'd said the words at a time when I never thought I'd need to swallow them. "Okay," I said finally, and the word tasted like a penny. "We need boundaries." We drafted what we thought were airtight rules, the way you childproof a house and convince yourself you've outsmarted gravity. No sleepovers on nights we planned to be together. No canceling our date nights for him. No public displays when we're all out together. And the big one. This should not impact the intimacy of our marriage. We said it like an oath. We meant it like a plea. The first week after she and Dean started sleeping together, She was attentive, almost performing being a good wife. She made our favorite pasta, lit the candle I love that smells like smoke and rain, and lay against me on the couch with a softness I hadn't felt in months. "How are you?" she asked, and I wanted to tell her I was a boy on a high dive waiting for the water to stop moving. Instead, I kissed her hair and said, "I'm okay." She smiled into my shirt that we had sex that week. Twice. It was good. Not frenzied, not movie lighting, but connected, the way you find your rhythm again after a song skips. I thought, we can do this. Then it dried up. Not gradually, like a faucet that worked until the second you needed water. She got hit hard with COVID, and we put it down to that. Weeks bled into months. Once every 2 weeks became once every 2 months became less than the number of fingers on one hand since Dean. When I asked how she was feeling, she'd say, "It's different with him." And my mind would run laps around that sentence until it was a blur. Different how? Better? Easier? Less of a decision? Every possible translation of different was a twin blade that I told myself to be patient while I watched her phone light up with his name. I told myself to be mature when she spent an evening at his place after promising we'd watch a movie together. "He had a rough day," she said by the door, already halfway into her shoes. "And we don't have to be clingy, right?" She pecked my cheek and said, "Love you." And the door clicked, and I sat down on the couch and let the TV play to a room that didn't feel like mine. The nights got long. The bed got huge. I'd wake at 2:13 a.m. to the creak of the hallway, her soft footfalls, the slide of the bathroom light, and then her side of the mattress sighing as she sank into it, smelling like someone else's body wash and the cool air of his apartment. I pretended to be asleep because I didn't want to be the husband who kept a ledger. I didn't want to be the suspicious detective in my own home. But the numbers kept themselves. This many hours at his, this many canceled plans, this many yes to him that widened into no's to me. The night she said, "It's different with him," I forgot how to swallow. We were standing in the hallway, our calendar open on the wall like a map of the life I thought we shared. I had asked, as calmly as I could, "Can you help me win you back?" She had looked at me with this tilted pity I didn't recognize and said, "I don't know that I need winning. It's just different. Different." A word that sounds like a shrug but lands like a verdict that I nodded because my teeth were warring with each other behind my lips and I needed them to stop. I nodded because a part of me still believed that love could be argued into staying. That night, in the dark, I listened to her breathe and wondered if I was resenting my wife or grieving the version of her that only existed because I kept feeding it my silence. The next morning, I started counting out loud. 2. I told myself, measuring the seconds my coffee took to fill the mug. 3. While tapping my finger against the stove. Discipline calms the storm. I learned that in the gym, in the office, and in every quiet corridor where I'd had to talk myself down from unspooling. If I couldn't have her body, I could have a plan. I didn't know for what, not yet. But the numbers eased the panic back into its kennel. Then came the text that took the breath out of my plan and gave me something better, clarity. It was a Saturday morning. We had blocked it off weeks ago for a day trip to the coast. She sent, "Dean had a panic attack last night. I promised I'd check on him this morning. Rain check?" I stared at my phone. Rain check. Like we were colleagues rescheduling lunch. 8 minutes later, I texted back, "Sure. We'll talk tonight." She hearted it, then sent a photo of a shabby cat she saw on her walk to the bus stop. "Look how grumpy," she wrote, 3 laughing emojis. I pictured her taking the picture on the way to Dean and felt something unclench and harden in me at the same time. At BY dinner time, I knew this wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just a bruised ego or the fear that another man had a secret potion I couldn't buy. It was the simple math of respect. She had promised me our relationship would not be impacted. It was impacted every day in small cuts and big gestures. She had looked me in the eye and told me our intimacy mattered. She saved the word for someone else, then told me the dictionary had moved. That night, I wrote 3 sentences on a clean sheet of paper. I am allowed to want. I am allowed to be wanted if I am not wanted here. I am allowed to leave. That I folded the paper and slid it into my wallet behind my driver's license. As if it were a credential I could hand to the mirror next time it asked me to be smaller, we tried a conversation. It was half therapy, half interrogation. "I feel invisible," I said, keeping my hands flat on the table so I could watch them not shake. She winced. "I don't want you to feel that way. I need sex to feel connected," I said. Not every day, not a quota, but something that tells me there's a we in this. She pinched the bridge of her nose. You want me to force it? That's not fair to either of us. Then how is it with him? She hesitated. It just happens. Even now, writing this, my jaw locks at those words. It just happens. With me, desire is a negotiation. With him, it's an accident she keeps walking into with her eyes open. I want to try, she offered, like a treaty you sign knowing you'll break it. Let's schedule a date night. Candlelight, phones away. I'll try. We scheduled it. We ordered takeout from the place where they know our names. I shaved. She wore the sweater I once told her makes her look like a quiet storm. We ate. We talked. We laughed. We kissed. I could feel her conscious effort like a muscle she hadn't used in a while. When we moved to the bedroom, she was there, then she wasn't, the way a person listening can smile and nod while they do their grocery list in their head. When it was over, she rested her hand on my chest and said, "See, we're okay," like a question she wanted me to answer for her. Later, in the bathroom, I stood under the shower head until the hot water emptied. The steam blurred everything to a kinder shape. I made a choice that surprised even me. For the next month, I wouldn't bring it up. I would record, not react. I would observe, not beg. I would pay attention to the data of my marriage the way I would to a project at work I suspected had a leak. In 30 days, we had sex once. She canceled 3 plans with me for him. She answered his texts at our table like an EMT on call. She forgot my sister's birthday dinner. She remembered his graduation ceremony for a certification I'd never heard about until I saw the picture of her at his side, eyes bright and unforced, holding the camera like she was holding the future. On day 31, I stood at the sink, toothbrush in hand, and realized my revenge had already begun. Because revenge, for me, wasn't going to be shouting or cheating or catching them together with a camera in my pocket. My revenge was going to be the quiet, devastating act of taking myself seriously, of making a plan she couldn't sweet-talk me out of giving her what she really wanted, a life where she didn't have to pretend to want me. I spat, rinsed, and stared at the man in the mirror who finally looked like someone I owed something to. Okay, I told him, we're going to do this right. And then I called a lawyer. I didn't pick a scorched earth attorney. I picked a strategist, Ava, recommended by a colleague who said, she wins by knowing what not to fight about. I like that. I didn't want a courtroom war. I wanted a life where my peace couldn't be vetoed. Our first consult was on a Tuesday at 8 a.m., the kind of hour that feels like confession without the pews. Ava's office was spare, one plant with leaves like little shields, a pen that moved like it already knew the ending. She listened quietly as I told the story. Our years together, the drought, the poly opening, the flood that carried me to her desk. When I mentioned Dean, her eyebrow twitched in a way that registered information, not judgment. Do you want out? She asked finally. Or do you want leverage to negotiate a different marriage? The question landed like I'd stepped on a stair I didn't know was there. For a full 30 seconds, I had no answer. Then I heard my own voice say, I want out. And I want it to be clean. She nodded. Clean means prepared. Do you share a mortgage? Yes. Joint title. I make more. I've been covering about 70% for the last 3 years. She scribbled. Any joint debt? Just the car. It's in her name. I've paid the last year of insurance. Good. Keep paying what you normally pay. No sudden changes before we file. It helps avoid claims of financial retaliation. Okay. Separate bank accounts. Mine is separate. We have one joint for household. Start tracking every household expense you cover solo. Keep it factual. No color commentary. If there's been any agreed boundaries violated, document those too. Not because they win you dollars, but because they speak to good faith. Good faith matters. I thought of the calendar on the wall, the vanished Saturdays, the rain checks, the it's different. I can do that. She tapped the pen. 2 more things. First, don't weaponize poly. Judges don't want to be the sex police. We frame this as incompatibility and a breakdown of agreed terms. Second, we'll plan your exit. Literally, where you'll live, what you'll take, what access you want to the home during the transition. The less chaos, the less pain. I exhaled. The corner of her mouth softened. You're allowed to be angry, she said. You're just not going to feed it. Walking out of Ava's office, my phone buzzed with a text from my wife. Any chance you can grab oat milk? Also, dinner with Dean tonight. He wants to celebrate his certificate. I'll be late. A month ago, that would have gut-punched me. Today, it was data. I replied, sure on the milk. Be safe that it's amazing how much of marriage lives in the small chores you complete without praise. I bought the oat milk. I loaded the dishwasher. I folded the laundry into neat squares because even now, my hands remembered the ritual. But I also did something new. I quietly opened a separate savings subaccount and routed a small, perfectly legal percentage of my next bonus there. Not to hide money, to make landing gear. That week, I booked a storage unit and labeled boxes in my head. Old photos will fight over if we see them together. The books she loves but doesn't read. The cast iron pan I seasoned for 5 winters. I moved nothing. I touched nothing. But a plan began to exist in space, not just in my skull that we tried again, because that's what you do when your house is a half-solved puzzle. She proposed quality time, as if the problem had been quantity. We went to a pottery class because doing something tactile will help. I sat at a wheel while an instructor with a voice like chamomile told us to center the clay with love. My wife laughed with the people at the next wheel. She looked 18 in that moment. Eyes bright, hands dirty, some easy joy that didn't need me. 2 hours later, she took a picture of our 2 wobbly bowls and put them on Instagram. The caption, maybe the real art is learning where your hands don't belong. People applauded. Dean commented with a fire emoji and a wink. That night she fell asleep before we touched. I lay on my back, staring into the dark, thinking, how did I become someone my wife saves her appetite from? The following weekend, I suggested a hike. She agreed. On the trail, the world was wide and green, and the air felt like forgiveness. She walked ahead of me and narrated the trees like she was auditioning for a documentary. Look, she said, pointing at a broken trunk. That's where lightning hit it. It still grew. She smiled like she had offered me a moral. I smiled back and wished I believed it applied to us. Halfway through, she took a call she said she needed to take. She dropped back on the path while I moved ahead, the wind carrying shreds of the conversation up the hill. No, tonight won't work. I know. I'll text you when. When she caught up, she slipped her hand in mine the way you tuck in a chair. I let it stay there. I told myself 100 couples navigated this exact thing better than I was. I told myself the story of my patience would be the thing we remembered when we were old. I told myself things I didn't need to believe for much longer. The night everything tilted, it wasn't a dramatic reveal. No lipstick on collars. No text preview flashing you up. While we kissed, it was the sound of a promise failing in my own mouth that we had planned dinner out. She arrived late, dropped into the booth, breathless and radiant in a way that made every word die before it hit my tongue. Sorry, she said. Dean's cat had this weird. It doesn't matter. How are you? She smiled, not waiting for an answer, and reached for the menu. Let's do phones away? I asked, careful. She hesitated, then flipped hers face down. Phones away, she echoed brightly. 15 minutes into discussing the specials like 2 people on their 3rd date. Her phone buzzed once, twice, 3 times in fast succession. Her eyes flicked to it. The muscle in her cheek jumped. Do you need to? No, she said too fast. Then the phone buzzed again, and she flinched. It might be Dean's neighbor about the cat, she breathed, apologetic as a prayer, and turned the phone to look that I watched her face soften, then reassemble into neutral. I just need to answer this one, she said, thumbs already moving. In that moment, a quiet switch flipped in me. It didn't feel like rage. Rage is hot and red and dumb. This was cool, precise, like the room had been slowly flooded, and I was finally acknowledging the water line on the walls. When she put the phone down, my smile was exact. We can go, I said. Her head snapped up. What? No. We're here. I'm here. I nodded. I know. She searched my face for drama, for a fight she could win by telling me I was being unreasonable. I gave her none. We ate. We talked. We went home. We slept back to back, the way a battlefield sleeps after the last bullet is inventoried. On Monday, I called Avo and said, I'm ready. Then we move, she said. The next 3 weeks were a choreography of small, irreversible steps. I collected documents, tax returns, bank statements, the mortgage paperwork I'd filed neatly while believing in always. I made a list of shared items and sorted them into hers, mine, negotiable. I stopped participating in conversations that were just smoke. When my wife asked, Do you think Dean's right about open relationships being the next social norm? I said, I think people should be honest about the costs. She frowned, thoughtful, then said, we're being honest. Though, like a question she had already answered for herself. One night, I asked if she'd consider couples counseling. She sighed like the word counseling was a chore chart. We tried that 2 years ago, she reminded me. We're in a different chapter now. Feels like a different book, I said. And she laughed, relieved I'd made a joke out of a truth. When Ava and I met again, she had a plan as detailed as a train schedule. We'd file no fault. We'd asked to keep the house with a buyout, because my income and contribution aligned with that. We'd propose a timeline for moving her things, coordinated and gentle. We'll present it like a kindness, Ava said, because it is. I rehearsed how to tell my wife. Not in our living room, where every object would register it. Not in a restaurant, where strangers' eyes could interrupt. I booked a quiet room in a small counseling office that rents space by the hour, the kind that smells like old books and lavender. I told her I wanted to talk there because I needed structure. She agreed. She always liked a plan, even when she didn't intend to follow it. The night before, I couldn't sleep. My body remembered every touch we had ever translated into safety. I remembered our first apartment with the crooked blinds. I remembered her mother's funeral, the way she dissolved into me and then built herself back up brick by brick while I held the mortar. I remembered the morning she told me I made her feel like home. I remembered the evening she told me need felt like a weight she didn't want to carry anymore. I lay awake and thought, love is a language. We stopped learning each other's grammar. Morning came like a decision you can't unmake. In the mirror, I looked like a man who could be anyone's husband and no one's fool. I tucked the folder with Ava's draft proposal into my bag. When we sat down in the rented room, she looked wary, then hopeful, like she'd trained herself to read tension as foreplay for reconciliation. I'm glad you booked this, she said. It means you still care. I do, I said, and the honesty burned. I care enough to stop hurting both of us. Her face stilled. What does that mean? It means I'm filing for divorce. For a second, there was no air. Then she barked a laugh that wasn't a laugh. You're not serious. I am. No, you're. She paused, recalibrating. We can fix this. I shook my head. We tried. And then I tried alone. And then I asked to try together, and you said it was different with him. She leaned forward, eyes shining with a thread of tears. I can try harder. We could reset. We could close things for a while. Close for me, I said softly. Or close for the optics? She looked at the floor. When she looked up, her anger had found its footing. So you're punishing me for being honest. You told me to explore. I did. Now you want to rewrite the past. No, I said. I want to stop living in a present you don't show up to. She stared. This is because of Dean. This is because of us, I said. But yes, Dean is the place you put the energy you promised wouldn't leave our house. She folded her arms like armor. So what, you expect me to just pack and vanish? I took a breath. No, I expect us to be civil. I've drafted a proposal. It's fair. It's not vindictive. I want the house with a buyout. You keep the car. We split the joint savings as of last month's balance. I'll continue covering bills until the end of the next month. We'll establish a schedule for you to find a new place. I'll give you space to come get your things. No surprises. No scenes. And Dean can help you move, I said. And the part of me that still loved her gave the line a gentler landing than it deserved. Her eyes filled, then steadied. I won't sign, she whispered. You don't have to today, I said, sliding the folder to her side of the table. But this is the direction I'm walking. She took the folder like it might burn her. We sat in a silence so dense I could feel the weight of every untold story in it. Then, faintly, her phone buzzed in her bag. We both heard it. Neither of us moved. She looked at me like a stranger on a train who has just realized we were headed to different stations all along. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she said, voice small. I didn't either, I said, until I remembered I could. And then, because cruelty has a sweet tooth for timing, the door behind us opened. The receptionist stuck her head in and said, apologetic, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Your hour is up. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't punch the steering wheel or scroll through our wedding photos while parked under a tree that suddenly looked biblical. I sat there, hands at 10 and 2, and breathed until the tremor in my forearms let go. Then I drove home with the radio off, The way you drive back from a country you're not visiting again. Back in our kitchen, the house made domestic noises, fridge hum, pipes clicking like a throat clearing. I set a glass on the counter and watched a stripe of late afternoon sun cut it into two separate bodies of water. I realized I no longer felt like a man waiting to see if he would be chosen. I felt like a man choosing. Clean, Ava had said. Not flashy, not messy, not a screaming match uploaded to a group chat. Clean meant the plan had to hold, even when my feelings tried to sprint ahead. So I made a list, printed it, and taped it inside the pantry, where only I would look. Legal, file no fault. Keep paying current obligations until the agreed transition date. Document all communication about logistics. Keep it factual, financial, separate a modest emergency fund. Freeze discretionary spending. No new joint purchases. Housing. Get a month-to-month rental secured quietly. Keep it furnished to avoid hauling. Storage unit for personal keepsakes. Property division. Inventory shared assets with photos and timestamps. Note provenance. Social. Script conversations with mutual friends. No character assassination. Keep receipts of broken boundaries, but don't fling them. Digital. Change passwords. The ones that should have been changed a year ago, but I kept for convenience. Disable shared calendars after notice. Emotional. Daily workout. No alcohol. Sleep. A therapist, not a barstool. Planning revenge felt like building a bridge back to myself. The revenge wasn't revenge, as in fireworks. It was consequence. It was, in a way, the first honest gift I'd given us both in years, the chance to live without pretending. I texted our landlord for the unit I'd seen listed above a bakery 2 neighborhoods over. The kind of place you rent when you're starting over at 38. Not cheap, not sad. A window big enough to convince plants to live. A door that didn't stick. Month to month is fine, the landlord wrote. We can do a soft move-in starting next week. My chest unknotted one notch. Next, I opened the Notes app and wrote a script for the friend group. The truth, minus the barbs. Hey everyone. We're separating. I'm not going to ask you to pick sides. We try to make poly work and failed at our agreements. I'm not shaming anyone's relationship style. I just need different boundaries to keep my dignity. I won't do details. I hope you'll respect that like you'd respect a closed door. I'm here if you need to talk about logistics for gatherings. I won't be at events where both of them will be for a while. I left the word both on purpose. It named what happened without handing out torches. Then I called a therapist, a quiet man named Saint, of all things, who answered on the second ring and offered me a Wednesday slot. We'll work on disentangling identity from outcome. He said in the consultation like it was as simple as removing a knot from shoelaces. We'll get your nervous system to stop reading your phone like a threat. I scheduled for sessions and a reminder to keep showing up even if I felt fine. I knew from experience. Fine was my version of I put the fire out by closing the door. The first close call came faster than expected. I was on the couch, surrounded by the tidy disaster of paperwork Ava had asked me to organize when my wife came home early. The walls of our house suddenly felt like a lung that had forgotten how to exhale. I shuffled the folders closed, casual as a hand in a pocket, and stood up. She took in the scene like a detective who knows the culprit is smart. What are you doing? Taxes, I said truthfully. She searched my face. Are you serious about the divorce? Yes, I said, and listened to how steady that sounded. Not brave, not cruel, just steady, like a table finally leveled. Her mouth quivered, a glitch between anger and grief. I thought you were bluffing, or trying to punish me. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm answering a question you asked when you turned us into an exception to your own rules. Silence. You can hear a house settle when two people stop holding it up with their breath. She glanced at the table. What's in those? Finances. Property. Things we will need to discuss. Not today. You're really doing this, she said again, as if repetition could pull a rabbit from a hat. Really. Her eyes hardened at the edges. Is there someone else? It had finally arrived. The question people ask when they can't imagine a boundary existing without a new villain to blame it on. No, I said. There's just me. Just you. She repeated, the words like a bad flavor she couldn't swallow. Is that the revenge? That you get to be noble? I'm not trying to be noble, I said. I'm trying to be done. My phone lit up on the table. From Ava, filed. Service packet ready when you are? We can have a process server deliver, where you can handle privately if you're confident. I flipped the phone face down, pulse accelerating. A process server was the cleanest way, but clean isn't always kind. I didn't want a stranger handing my wife documents at work while she stood there with colleagues watching her face rearrange. I told Ava I'd handle it. The second close call was social. A mutual friend, Lena, texted, "You okay?" She told me you might be taking some space. I stared at those quotation marks until the room tilted. Taking space sounded like I'd gone on a walk and could return with a better attitude. I typed, deleted, typed again, then sent. "I'm okay enough. We're ending the marriage. Please don't get caught in the middle. If you host group things, I'll bow out for a bit. I care about you." Lena replied with a voice note I didn't open for 3 hours. When I did, her voice teetered between furious and tender. "I love you both, but I've watched you shrink for a year. I'm relieved you're not doing it anymore." It felt like someone had reached into my chest and turned on a light I'd forgotten was wired. 2 nights later, I executed the first visible component of the plan. She had dinner plans with Dean. I used that window to move the first boxes. My books, my clothes, the old letters my grandfather wrote me in pen so blue it looked like a vein. Each box was labeled with a number and a list of contents in a shared spreadsheet Ava had recommended. "It makes negotiations factual," she'd said. "Facts are furniture. Feelings ricochet." When my wife came home, she stood in the bedroom door and scanned the closet like the answer might be written on a tag. "You moved some things." I nodded. "I'm giving us both cleaner edges." Her chest rose and fell once, twice. "So that's it. You're just leaving." "I'm not vanishing," I said. "I'm moving out over the next 2 weeks. I've paid rent through the end of next month and the utilities for 2 months. You'll have time to find a place or decide about the house. We'll talk through asset division with our attorneys. I'll send you a clear calendar." "Dean offered me his place," she said quickly, like a test. "Said I could crash while I figure it out." I let the words find their own gravity. "Then you have options," I said. She blinked, surprised I hadn't risen to the bait, surprised I wasn't performing heartbreak the way TV taught us. The performance had ended. I wasn't auditioning for the role of the husband who proved he could win his wife back despite competition. I was writing myself out of a story that stopped being about us a long time ago. The last component of the plan was the friend reveal. Not a group ambush. Not a public flaying. I set up 3 brief coffees with the anchors. Lena, a couple named Mar and Joe, and yes, Dean. I wanted no rumors to do the work my mouth could handle. With Lena, it was easy. She squeezed my forearm across the table and said, "You taught me something I didn't want to know." I nodded. "Me too." With Mar and Joe, there were tears. "We thought you were okay with it," Joe said softly. "We didn't realize the math changed." I smiled at the kindness in the wrong conclusion. "I thought I was okay too," I said. "Turns out I was okay with the idea, not the reality." And then there was Dean, my wife's exception, the man who'd been allowed to represent everything I wasn't, without anyone having to say it out loud. I invited him to a public park at noon, sunlight loud and democratic. He arrived alone, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes bright but guarded. The kind of man who thinks he can charm his way out of a courtroom. "Thanks for meeting," I said. "Of course," he said. "How are you holding up?" The script wrote itself. The man who was sleeping with your wife asks how you are, like he's your pastor and not the earthquake. "I'm steady," I said. "I wanted to look you in the eye and make this simple. We're divorcing." "That's not a threat. It's a plan." He nodded, a touch rehearsed. "I'm sorry if..." "You don't have to apologize," I said. "We're all adults. But hear me. While the legal process unfolds, I'm asking you to give our house a wide berth. No drive-bys to get her stuff without scheduling it with me. No popping in when you think I'm at work. No texts to me about how enlightened we should all be. You keep your counsel, and I'll keep mine." He looked offended for half a second, like I'd ruined his cosplay as the reasonable interloper. Then the offense dissipated, replaced by a nod. "I respect that. I don't need your respect. I need your distance," I said. "Ask her to tell you the truth about what she promised me versus what she brought to your bed. If she can do that, maybe you have a shot. If she can't, you'll learn my lesson faster than I did." He swallowed. His gaze skittered to the playground where a kid in a red jacket was trying to kick higher than a law of physics. "Coming back to me," he said, almost plaintive. "It's different with us." I laughed, not unkindly. "That must be nice," I said, stood, and left him there with his difference. After that, the remaining steps were logistics, details, numbers. Clean. I stopped engaging with texts that tried to pull the conversation back into an emotional arm wrestle. When she wrote, "I had a flashback of our honeymoon today, and I just lost it," I replied, "I hear you. Let's stick to logistics for now." When she asked, "Would flowers help?" I wrote, "They're beautiful. Save the money for your new place." The day I scheduled for service, I didn't hire a stranger. I ringed our doorbell myself at 5 p.m., a neutral hour, and when she opened the door, I handed her the documents and said, "This is official now. You'll see a proposed timeline inside. Call Ava's office if you want to discuss through counsel. I won't debate it here." My hand didn't shake. Neither did hers, to her credit. "I never meant to hurt you," she said. "I know," I said. "And because this had to be clean even when it could have been cruel," I added, "I believe you." At 5:20 p.m., walking down our front path, I exhaled a decade. You spend years building a home, and you don't realize the house also builds a version of you. I was the man who fixed the loose doorknob without being asked. The man who remembered which burner ran hot and turned it down before she reached for the pan. The man who left a folded blanket on her side of the couch because she always forgot she might get cold. Leaving the house meant leaving the man I thought I had to be in order to be loved. Ava called that week with the kind of good news that doesn't feel like joy so much as oxygen. Her counsel is responsive, she said. They're not throwing sand in the gears. They want small modifications, timing mostly. We can accommodate a few without giving up your position. And the house? I asked. They're balking at you keeping it, she said. They floated a sail. I stared at the ceiling of my small new living room, tracing cracks that had probably been there a decade. If we sell, she gets to be a martyr and I get to be a vagabond. If I keep it, there's a narrative that I took it. Stop listening to narratives, Ava said gently. Listen to math. You've paid 70% for years. You can afford the mortgage solo. You want it for reasons that are not about punishing her. That's a position that holds. I wanted to prove to myself I can keep something that mattered, I admitted. That's an emotional reason, she said, not unkindly. Useful to note. But the case is still strong without it. We countered. We offered a buyout number, fair and slightly generous. We offered to cover closing costs. We offered timing that gave her months, not weeks. The reply came 2 days later. Acceptance, if we included one more concession. She wanted a final walkthrough day where she could say goodbye. I could have said no. The petty part of me wanted to smirk and ask if she meant a goodbye to the house or the history she'd already been slowly exiting. But clean is clean. We agreed, with parameters. 2 hours. No Dean. One friend if you need company. I'll be there with a third party to inventory disputes. The friend she brought for the goodbye was Lena. That alone softened some corner of me I'd been protecting like a bruise. They arrived on a Sunday when the house smelled like lemon oil and the ghost of 1,000 breakfasts. I opened the door. She stepped inside like a swimmer edging into a lake in October, 1 inch of shin at a time, breath catching. Lena hovered, purposefully ordinary, point guarding the silence. We walked the rooms the way you walk a museum of your own life. Here's where we disagreed about what rug to buy and ended up with no rug because neither would compromise. Here's where we danced 3 times, 2 to a Spotify playlist and once with no music after she came home the night she got the job that made her feel 10 feet tall. Here's the corner where I had set up my desk during lockdown. The window where the neighbor's cat liked to sit and judge my posture. Here's the bedroom where we had been tender and then careful and then nothing at all. I never wanted it to be like this, she said, not theatrical. Just small. I know, I said. Neither did I. We ended in the kitchen, because kitchens are where endings gather even when they pretend to be beginnings. She ran her hand over the counter, then opened the junk drawer, laughed at an old pair of chopsticks we'd hoarded like relics. You always said I never cleaned this, she murmured. You always said I over-organized it, I smiled. A true thing, simple as water. Lena cleared her throat softly. Do you want to say anything to each other? She asked. It was not a trap. She was offering the ritual we hadn't earned but might need. My wife looked at me. For the first time in months, maybe years, her face was empty of performance. No pity. No justification. No different. Just a woman who had built something, cracked it, and now stood in the dust with the person she started with. You were my family, she said, even when I forgot what that meant. And you were mine, I said, even when I stopped recognizing the shape. She took her key off her ring. The tiniest shiver of metal on metal. She held it out. I guess this is yours now. I didn't take it. I reached into my pocket and took out a different key. The spare that opened the small storage unit I'd rented for her. Something I'd arranged with Ava when we started dividing property. I'd moved all of her box things there 2 days prior, so she wouldn't have to awkwardly ferry them with me hovering. I placed the spare on the counter between us. This is yours, I said. Unit 14C. It's climate controlled. Your books, your winter clothes, your grandmother's teacups. They're all there, labeled with a spreadsheet emailed to your council. I paid for 3 months. It buys you time. Her mouth opened without words. Lena's eyes flashed with something that looked like relief and grief and admiration, and thank God somebody grew up. I took my key, my house key, from my own ring and slid it into my palm. I'm not doing this to be a hero, I said. I'm doing it because chaos was our love language for too long. I'm switching dialects. She laughed once, a sound like glass catching light. You always had a way with endings, she said. You make them look like choices instead of failures. Sometimes they're both, I said as I handed her a manila envelope. Inside, a typed letter, the kind you write when you need the sentences to hold still. It said the things I could only say once without getting dragged back into the undertow. It thanked her for the years that deserved thanking. It told her, without flinching, where the damage came from. It told her, and this was the part I'd rewritten 5 times, that I didn't hate her lover. He had simply been the mirror she decided to believe reflected her better. I hope, the letter ended, you learn to choose someone without making them a safe place to store what you don't want to carry. She tucked the envelope into her bag like a passport. What about the friend group? She asked, practical to the last. It's going to be weird. We'll make it less weird by not making it warfare, I said. I won't attend the same events for a while. I won't narrate you. I expect the same courtesy. I paused. I met with him. Her eyebrows tilted. You did. He knows the rules, I said simply. We walked them out. At the door, she turned back, eyes too bright. You were always the kinder one. I wasn't, I said. I just learned to be sooner. And then I closed the door because there are scenes you can't salvage by adding more dialogue. A week later, the paperwork finalized faster than anyone predicted. No contested hearings. No 11th hour motions. Clean. I moved the last of my things into the new apartment. A chair that knew my posture. A lamp that made the room look like late afternoon even at night. I hung nothing on the walls for a while, letting a place learn me before I asked it to hold me. The social fallout was quieter than the movies promised. A couple of mutual friends tried the both sides routine for a month, then simply adapted. A couple evaporated. The people who stayed did so with a clarity that felt like a new kind of love, one that didn't require me to be the reasonable one to earn my place at the table. Dean did what men like Dean do when the performance ends. He went quiet. I saw him once, months later, outside a bar where our group used to gather. He had his arm around my ex-wife's shoulders. She looked fine, not glowing, not destroyed. Fine. He saw me, lifted a hand. A small salute of we're in the same city of choices. I nodded once and kept walking. The last part of the plan, a part one didn't realize was part of the plan until I was living it, was this. I started wanting again. Not sex like a hunger strike finally broken, but wanting as in, I wanted the morning light to hit a cup of coffee I made for myself. I wanted to run until my ribs ached like I'd been laughing. I wanted to sit in a movie theater alone and not feel like the seat next to me was a confession that I deleted the Notes app script for the friend group. I deleted the list in the pantry. Different pantry now, different man. I kept one list. The 3 sentences I'd folded into my wallet months before to I am allowed to want, I am allowed to be wanted if I am not wanted here. I am allowed to leave that I taped them to the inside of my closet where they wouldn't preach at me every time I got dressed. They're not tenets. They're a map. Maps don't judge you for how long you took to find them. They just help you get home. On a quiet Sunday, long after the dust settled, I returned to the house, my house, with a set of fresh keys for the new locks and a box of screws for the cabinet door that always stuck. I fixed it not because she used to complain about it, but because I wanted a drawer that didn't resist opening. I made a pot of tea and sat on the floor and listened to a space that finally sounded like its own voice. My phone buzzed. A message from Saint, my therapist. How are you reading your nervous system today? I typed, like a friend. like someone who learned that revenge can be as simple as refusing to participate in my own erasure. He sent a single thumbs up. It felt like a benediction. 2 months later, the friend group planned a picnic in the park. I went. She did not. Lena handed me a paper plate with an orange segment arranged like a smile and said, "How's the house?" I told her about the drawer. She laughed. "You too in that drawer," she said affectionately, then corrected herself. "You in that drawer." As the sun slid down behind the trees, someone cranked a Bluetooth speaker and a song came on that used to mean we were about to leave together. It didn't hurt. It registered like weather. I packed up my things, said my goodbyes, and walked back to the car through a tunnel of trees that looked, for once, exactly the way they were, rooted, generous, not asking me to be anything but a man who chose himself without setting anyone on fire. If there was a revenge, if you need the word because the genre demands it, it was that I built a life where my yes meant yes again, to me, where my home didn't need to forgive me for living in it, where my silence was no longer a favor I did for other people at my own expense. That I handed her a key to a storage unit. I kept the keys that mattered. And when I finally slept, really slept, it felt like the first time the house had a heartbeat, and it was mine. There's a version of this story where I start dating someone new and my ex sees me across a restaurant and her face crumples and the camera freezes on her regret. That's television. Reality was this. Some nights I missed us so hard I paced the kitchen like I'd misplaced my name. Some mornings I woke up and realized I hadn't braced for impact all night and grinned at nothing. Consequence isn't cinematic. It's calibrated. It's a mattress that doesn't sink toward the indentation of a person who no longer sleeps there. Was I jealous of her side piece? At the beginning, sure. Envy is the language you learn when you think scarcity is natural. Then I learned another language. Boundaries spoken clearly sound like freedom. No villain, no saint. Just a man who constructed a quiet, legal, devastating revenge by refusing to accept a life he had to apologize to himself for wanting. If you're where I was, reasoning yourself into a corner, calling it maturity, hear me. The most dangerous villain in any relationship is not the other person. It's the story you tell yourself about what you deserve. You deserve to hear different and say, "Then I'll go where my sameness is loved." You deserve a home that doesn't require a power outage to feel intimate. You deserve to be the person who hands over the key to a past and turns the lock on a future where you fit. Quiet can be a weapon. I used mine to cut a path. It worked. If this hit home, if you've ever mistaken self-erasure for love, drop "I pick me" in the comments so others know they're not alone. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs permission to leave a story that doesn't love them back. Here, we don't do loud revenge. We do clean exits, clear boundaries, and the kind of endings that give your life back its voice.